Welcome to the food industry. Whether you're stocking grocery store shelves or you're moving pallets in a food warehouse, you are now part of the dynamic food industry. And in this fast changing food industry, there's one non-negotiable, one thing that we just don't negotiate, and that's food safety. There's also, no matter where you are in the world, there's some basics to any food operation when it comes to food safety. Hand washing, for example. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about why it's so important. Health policy. What happens if you're not feeling well at work? What do you do? What about your uniform? And if you don't wear a uniform, what happens if you're wearing soiled clothes? Is it okay to handle food? We're also going to talk about eating, drinking, and smoking. There's a place to do it when you work in the food industry. We're also going to talk about personal effects, that backpack that you hike over your shoulder on your way to work in the morning. See, there's a proper place to store that when you work around food. And then storage areas. Simple way to remember storage areas. Those might be the whole warehouse that you're working in. It might also be a back storeroom that you're working in. But when you go through an open door, you make sure you close it, especially if that door is open to the outside, because that's a great way for pests like cats, dogs, mice, and non-company employees to enter your facility. We don't want that entering the facility if they're not supposed to be there. Let's talk about hand washing and why.
So you're probably thinking, why are we talking about hand washing? We've been washing our hands since we were little kids. And in the food industry, not only getting the dirt off, but getting the bacteria and germs off our hands is important. Take a look at your hands. You've got palm prints, you've got spaces between your fingers. If you turn your hands over, you got like wrinkled skin on the back of your knuckles. There's a lot of places that we can harbor germs and bacteria. So we want to make sure that we are thoroughly cleaning our hands so we're not transmitting those germs onto the products that we're handling. So the proper way to do this is to thoroughly wet our hands. This helps us be able to distribute the soap evenly all over our hands so we can get all those surfaces. So we wet our hands, we add the soap, and then we scrub. And what do we mean by scrub? We mean like to get the backs of your hands in between your fingers. To get between your fingers, you kind of lace your fingers together. You want to scrub under your fingernails. You want to get on the palms of your hands. You want to get your thumbs. You thoroughly scrub your hands. And we do this for 20 seconds. 20 seconds doesn't mean that you're going to end up watching a timer on a clock or anything. You can sing happy birthday to yourself in your head. And when you complete the second verse of happy birthday, you have completed a 20-second vigorous scrub of your hands. Now you're ready to rinse. And we want to rinse off all the soap and all the germs that we have loosened in that process. How often we wash our hands depends on the when we come to work. So when we come to work, we want to start with clean hands. If you get your hands dirty when you are working, time to wash your hands again. And always and forever, you want to wash your hands after using the restroom. After we've rinsed, we want to make sure that we thoroughly dry our hands. So we're going to dry them with either the hand dryers they've provided or the paper towels. And thoroughly dry means you don't like half dry them under the hand dryer or the paper towels and then wipe them off on your pants or shirt. That kind of defeats the whole purpose for why we washed our hands in the first place. So make sure that you think about these things when you're hand washing in a food operation. Your company will have a health policy, and they'll do that to protect the food. So if you are feeling unwell, or if you have some kind of, say, an infection on a sore or a wound, you want to let your supervisor know so they can maybe put you in a place in the operation where you're not going to do any harm to the product that you're handling. Anytime we have any kind of a wound, it needs to be covered with a bandage of some sort so that open wound isn't adding germs to what you're handling. Typically, when you have a Band-Aid on your hands, you will have a glove to cover it. Again, so you're protecting the product that you're handling. So that's why you need to follow that. And your company will have a specific policy for you to follow. The type of clothing we wear into our operations depends on your employer. Some employers will provide a uniform. They may even require you to change into that uniform when you report to work. Some employers say it's okay to wear your own clothing into the facility. In both cases, the cleanliness of the uniform is really important. If you were to wear your own clothes from home, and you're going to work on the job out where the food is, and you petted your fluffy dog or cat and got cat or dog hair on you when you come to work, now that's a problem. So it's really important that no matter what type of clothing your employer requires, that you keep it clean. There are restrictions on where we can do food and beverages, and even smoking when we're working in the warehouse. Some jobs and other industries allow that when you're doing your task. In the food industry, it's different. We have specific places where you are allowed to consume food, beverages, and cigarettes, and some places where you are not, and that's generally out where you're handling the food. So your company policy will prohibit where you do that. Again, we're trying to prevent contamination of the food that you're handling that other people will consume. When we're talking about personal effects, we're talking about those things we bring to work. They probably don't have anything to do with our job, but they're things we want to have with us and available. So they're things like backpacks, lunches, phones, purses, could even be medications. So these are things that we need a place to store so they're not out in the work area with us, because they're not allowed out there. We don't want to take anything out there that could possibly contaminate the food we're going to be handling. So our company will generally give us a place to store these items so they're secured and we feel safe having them at work. Typically it's a locker, it could be a locked cubby, something along that. But it's important that you know your company policy. And it's also important that you follow that policy and respect it. They've put it in place for a reason. It's to protect the product. They give you a place to store it, so that's where the items should be stored. You'll also probably be working in a lot of storage areas, and there are rules for the storage areas. They will have things like keep the doors closed and like that. So if you look in this particular picture, you can see that somebody has propped the door open. Well, this causes problems to the food that's stored back there. For instance, you could let insects in, or maybe a stray cat from the neighborhood, or even rodents. You might see a mouse or a rat come in. They're going to contaminate the product. Therefore, we have to keep the doors closed to keep them out. There's another concern, and that is if somebody that doesn't belong in the facility that comes in, they could be in there to do some intentional harm to the product. If you see anything at all when you're working in these areas that doesn't look right, follow your gut instinct. Report it to your supervisor, because if there's a problem, it can't get fixed until it's reported. So again, make sure that you let somebody know if something isn't right in those areas. Another thing you might run into is handling frozen and refrigerated foods. They have very specific methods for keeping them cold and temperatures they have to be stored in. So if you were to see some like frozen food stored on the dock out where it's an ambient temperature, it's like room temperature, that's going to be a problem. Make sure that you understand and follow all the rules your company puts around where you're storing the frozen and the refrigerated foods. So anything that doesn't look right, again, report it.
So again, welcome to the food industry. The food you handle will be consumed by many people. You're an important link in the food safety chain. The food safety rules are in place for a reason, so remember to follow them. And if you're not sure what they are, ask your supervisor. Again, welcome to the food industry.